412-575-2600 on the Borders and Borders hotline. Also taking your tweets at Josh Taylor HD as well. Talking about Mike Sullivan's contract extension. He's extended now through the 2023-2024 season. Pirates now down to their last couple swings. One out here in the bottom of the ninth. They trailed the Brewers 6-1 in the game. They were pretty much in up until the eighth inning when things just fell apart. In that eighth inning, Dovydas Neverauskas gives up 2 home runs and gives Milwaukee a much bigger cushion than they had going into that inning. So 1 run quickly became 5, and that's where they sit right now, down to their last few swings. Let's go to the phone lines. We will start with Joe in Penn Hills. Joe, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Josh. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good. I was until this game. You know, for 2 years now, Josh, they've been bringing up this guy Neverauskas. He's come up 4 times last year. They send him down. He gets bombed. They send him up this year. He's been up 3 times. I'm confused completely why he's still in baseball. No one, the guy got a good arm, but he's not a pitcher. And bringing him in this crucial game shows what Huntington has done for 11 years. And I'm not going to say anything about injuries. That's part of the game. When you have 11 years, Josh, and you draft 400 players, half of them are pitchers, and Neverauskas is in the most important game. That this is a 2-game swing. Sell everybody. I'm done. I'm a Pirate diehard at 70.
Wait, Joe. That's what it took for you? Thanks for the call. It took this point for you? It took this?
Oh, yeah. I still was, dreaming that Huntington would sell and Nutting would maybe never, sell the team tomorrow. That's my dream. It's never happened. Hey, you know what they should do, Josh?
Joe, if that's your dream, if that's your dream, wake up. If that's your dream, wake up. It's not happening. It's not reality, Joe.
$500,000.
Joe, it's not reality. If you're waiting for this ownership group to change tomorrow, people have been waiting for it for a decade plus. It's not happening, Joe. You're hoping for the wrong thing. It's not happening. And if it took a game like this to change your mind on this organization, where were you the first 3 months of the season? Because things were a lot worse going into May and June than they were now. If anything, I would have probably jumped ship a month and a half ago. There were people that jumped ship 2 weeks ago going into that game against Detroit. I can actually pinpoint some of the very people at the very moment when they were ready to let go. When this team was trailing by 6 runs against Detroit a couple Wednesdays ago, people were jumping off the ship then. So why did you wait till 2 weeks later? Was it because they went 10-4 in the last couple weeks, or was it something else? It just seems like a really odd moment to pinpoint this particular moment to actually be done with this team because they brought Neverauskas in. Now, I won't disagree it's a bad decision because it is. It's terrible. As soon as I saw Neverauskas in this game, I'm sitting there going, that's the wrong guy to bring in when the game this close, when you just clawed your way back into it. That was the first thing I thought. I said, of all the guys in the world, I wouldn't go to this guy. The funny thing about it was Neverauskas starts giving up runs, then they have Chris Stratton warming up. I would have gone to Stratton before I went to Neverauskas. I would have never used it in that particular situation. And what made it more complicated for me was Milwaukee's already burning Josh Hader. That's what makes that decision important. Not even just who you bring in, but when you bring them in. Because Milwaukee brings in Josh Hader in the 7th. So now they're burning Hader early when they might not be able to use him in the 9th if you have your last opportunity to try to keep it close. And after you just clawed back into a 2-run game, you bring this guy in. When Milwaukee's already burning Hader and he might not stick around to the 9th. That was the thing that frustrated me. So if that's the case, there's a lot of other examples of bad bullpen management by this team we can point to in the first 3 months of this season if you really needed the jumping off point. I just find it weird that now is the time. Everything else I agree with what you're saying. And here's one thing I will tell you, because you mentioned 11 years of Neil Huntington. If you're going by this as the picture of what the bullpen looks like, then you're ignoring a lot of other great bullpen moves that he's made. And I've said this, I've had this same disclaimer for Neil Huntington. For every good move he's made, he has about 1 or 2 bad ones that he's made to go with it. So if you're talking about Neverauskas, okay, fine. But you have the Vasquez move that works for you. You have also, there was Mark Melancon who kind of started this whole thing. There was Jason Grilli that had a lot to do with this thing. So there's been some good bullpen moves since then. Joakim Soria is one of those guys. So if you're looking at the clear picture and just burning it down to one guy, I don't think that's a good, clear view of the product. Now, if you want to talk about the lack of power in the organization, that's a good place to start for me. And that's been that way for not even 11 years. It's been that way for a couple decades now. That's something I'm looking at. If you're talking about the lack of development of starting pitching through the system, that's another thing you probably pick out and say, Okay, this is something that you look at, and that's probably a problem. And that's another thing that goes back a couple of decades. I'm not just looking at W's Neverauskas and saying, this is what the picture looks like. I think that's way too generalized, and there's a couple other bigger problems than just Neverauskas if you're picking out what's wrong with this team. Let's go to Mike in Oakland. Mike, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Josh. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Good, how are you?
Good. So I'll try not to be too long. I remember I talked to you about 4 or 5 months ago, and I ranted about the Pirates, I think, or something. You didn't like it because I think I took a long time.
Yeah, we got a short period of time in this segment, brother.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll try to be short. The guy stole my thunder about Neverauskas, but I will follow up on. I mean, honestly, Josh, this guy has stunk every time he's called up.
Yep.
His ERA is, 8 or 9 or 10. Why is he continuously brought up? Why aren't these questions asked to Neil Huntington every Sunday when he speaks to the media? This guy should not be in the bullpen. And again, with Stratton, didn't he pitch 3 innings of shutout ball last time, and he struck out 5 in a close game 2-1? Why isn't he brought in?
Thank you.
It's so sick to watch this team give up a chance to be competitive by bringing in the worst bullpen guy there is. Sorry to rant.
No.
I just had to tell you that.
Great
John.
question. That's a great question because that's my question. Why not Stratton in front of Neverauskas? Why do you wait till Neverauskas completely throws a stinker and then you warm up Stratton? I'm glad you brought that example up of what Stratton did. They brought Stratton in to bolster the bullpen depth. They brought him in specifically for that reason. You brought in Chris Stratton so you would never have to turn to a Neverauskas. And what do? You turn to Neverauskas instead of Stratton. You get what you pay for. In my opinion, from that perspective, you really get what you pay for. I thought Chris Stratton would have been a better option. Honestly, I would have thought just about anybody would have been a better option. Just not that guy. I am not disagreeing with the thought to put him in there, and that being a bad move because I agree wholeheartedly. I'm with you, Mike. It should have been Stratton. And if it's not Stratton, if it's not Neverauskas, do someone else, but just not him. I'd have been happy with anybody but him. Jim and Butler, before we go to a break. Jim, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Yeah, hey, Josh. If you watch Brault, and when he throws these balls that are way outside and he's falling off the mound, watch where his release point is.
Yeah.
That pitch. But when he does throw a strike down the middle, he has a different release point, and he's not out of control after he throws that pitch.
Right.
And one other thing, I don't know if you remember Ray Miller and his philosophy. Throw strikes, change speeds, work fast.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
It's really been the age-old theory, and thanks for the call. I'm glad you brought up Stephen Brault's release point because a colleague of mine, I believe it was either Jason Rollison or Alex Stumpf, shout out to both of them, but they actually, one of them wrote a piece talking about Stephen Brault being more consistent with his release point. At the beginning of the season, when he was in the bullpen, when they first started to stretch him out, there was a chart with different areas of his release point, and it was all over the grid. It was all over the place. It wasn't consistent. But within maybe that 3 or 4 start cluster, within that last month or so, you saw all of them starting to be within the same grouping. They were it was a lot more dense. All those dots were in the same area. It was a lot more consistent. And tonight, I noticed the same thing, that it started to be a little bit more sporadic like it had been a couple months ago. And that was a concern for me, too. So when he calls for the trainer and wants to come out of the game, the first thing I'm thinking is, oh, God, here we go. This can't be good. So I'm hoping they diagnosed it, or at least they announced it was left shoulder discomfort. They actually haven't diagnosed it yet, because if that's the diagnosis, then God help us. But they actually announced it as left shoulder discomfort. I hope it's nothing serious, because when you see, like you mentioned, the variation of that release point, especially considering the fact that he had really started to get it so under control in the past month or so. So when you see that change, it is a little bit bothersome. We got to take a break. We got more phone calls, maybe some tweets. We'll see you in a minute.